It is, to be honest, a distinct pleasure and a privilege for me to be here this morning to address you, as well as to recognize and reward our partners in advancing the successes that we've had in agriculture over the last 12 months. It was just over 8 months ago, in fact in November 2010, when the call went out inviting members of the media to participate in the second annual Excellence in Agricultural Journalism competition, organized and hosted by the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture and the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, with the support of the Ministry of Food Production, Land and Marine Affairs. This competition is a very commendable one and has prize monies totaling over $11,000 US. The competition's objectives demonstrated a certain synchronicity with the goals and objectives of the stakeholders in local agriculture, namely to foster greater understanding of food and nutrition security and related issues amongst the media in Trinidad and Tobago, to increase interaction and create new partnerships between the agricultural sector and the media, to encourage more informed reporting on food security issues, and fourthly, to encourage awareness of food security issues among citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So important is the role of the media practitioners that a 3-day regional workshop was hosted for some 40 regional media personnel in Port of Spain in April by CARDI. There were representatives there from Antigua, Barbados, Belize, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This was in fact a specialized training workshop for regional journalists in agricultural journalism to provide them with the tools and the techniques necessary to both identify and to access agriculture-related information in their respective countries. In 2009, the competition's inaugural theme was Achieving Food Security in Trinidad and Tobago, a National Priority. This year's theme was Agriculture, Rooting for Sustainable Development. I wish to seize this opportunity this morning to remind some of you of our accomplishments and the stories that you have carried over the last 12 months that has lent support to our theme of Rooting for Sustainable Development. They include a brand new revised incentive program that has been developed in conjunction with the farmers of our nation. And let me add also our fisherfolk and aquaculturalists. We have a new proposal before Cabinet that is currently dealing with the thorny issue of predial larceny. In fact, very shortly, I believe in about a week's time, the Ministry will launch a national advertising campaign which will in part highlight that predial larceny is indeed a serious crime, calling on all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to take action against this unconscionable act by some. After all, if we are encouraging increased farming activities from our farmers and from the people of Trinidad and Tobago through backyard gardening, we must by necessity put in place the protective measures to ensure that they can protect their stakeholders. We're addressing the whole issue of infrastructure by constructing some 250 kilometers of agricultural access roads during the course of this fiscal year. That exercise will in fact be completed by the end of August of this year. We've also attempted and have started the whole process of addressing the issues of flood abatement and water for agriculture, as we are constructing, and again we are almost close to completing, 300 irrigation ponds built this year alone in the last 4 months across Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that we can hold water so that when in times of drought we will have water for our farmers, but also to provide facilities that when we have flooding, water can actually go into these ponds. We're upgrading 16 fish landing sites this year. There are 64 fish landing sites across Trinidad and Tobago that has some basic facilities. There has been a scandalous neglect of these facilities over the years. We are upgrading 16 of them and providing them with basic amenities like water, running water, toilet facilities, bathroom facilities, lockers, jetties, and so on, that will ensure that the lives of our fisherfolk is of a much better standard than it has been in the past. We've already commissioned the fish landing site of Mon Diablo, and on Friday of this week, we will commission the upgraded facility of Balandra, and early next week, Maracas and Cocorite. There are 12 others carded for upgrade, and works on all of those have already started, and all of those works will be completed on the other 12 by the end of September of this year. Many of you would have heard much talk about the large farms that we inherited. We've had to do some rejigging of these farms. We've had to do, many of you would have also read that the previous regime had spent about $100 million in putting in infrastructure. We've had to relook at all of that, and in terms of the kinds of crops that we will be growing, so that we ensure that we do not compete against our small farmers. We are scheduled to launch 3 of those large farms in August. In fact, tomorrow, tomorrow, we'll be commissioning one of them in Edinburgh. And I want to say that of the 3 farms that we are commissioning in the next month or so, one of them will be dedicated to the resuscitation of the rice industry in Trinidad and Tobago. About 10 years ago, we were producing about 30% of the amount of rice we consumed in Trinidad. Today, we produce less than 5% of the rice that we consume. The rest of it is imported. And there's really no good reason why we ought not to take a very strong look at resuscitating the rice industry. And one of these large farms is dedicated to the resuscitation, or the beginning of the resuscitation of the rice industry in Trinidad. We continue, and we have in the last 12 months, to encourage youth interest in the agricultural sector. Because when one looks around and one looks at the demographics of our farmers, we'll see that many of them are in the 50s and 60s and 70s and some older. In fact, only about 3 months ago, I had the privilege of honoring some farmers in the Carson Field area, and they ranged from the ages of 90 to 103, and they were still farming. But our farming community is getting older because we have never encouraged young people to get involved in farming, because farming has always, and agriculture has always been seen as the bottom rung of the ladder. No parent in the last 30 years have wanted or would have encouraged their children to go into farming. We want to change the face of that, and our programs that we've launched over the last few months, and that we will continue with as far as our communications program is concerned, will be geared towards getting young people involved in farming. I can't emphasize that point enough. In fact, we have met with students at UE on a regular basis. At UTT, we've recently launched the BAFT program, which is the Biodegradable Biosciences, Agriculture and Food Technology program, which is a degree program. We have, at the ministry, Cabinet has already approved that from September, we will be taking 50 agricultural graduates on board, 50. And we will do that every year to try to find places for these agricultural graduates who come out, who generally have no opportunity or avenues for them to go into having spent or committed 3 years of their lives studying agriculture. Only last week, in fact last Tuesday, we hosted an awards ceremony for an art and photography competition for schools, for which we received about 300 entrants from 40 schools, both primary and secondary. So therefore, the interest in the sector is there. The interest in the sector has been energized, and to a large extent that has to do with the work that the media has been doing in terms of publicizing the work of the ministry. We're putting more lands into agricultural production. We've, over the last 3 or 4 months, distributed over 1,200 agricultural leases of 2-acre parcels to our Caroni workers, ex-Caroni workers, and very recently, about 2 weeks ago, we went out and we identified a further 3,000 acres of land, agricultural land, that we made available by the end of August through advertisements for distribution for those who wished to get involved in the farming industry. Also, we have disassociated the whole thorny issue of land tenure from incentives. In the past, many of you will know that you may not have had regularization of your land through not having an official lease. And as a direct result, you would not have been able to access the incentives that the ministry offers, or you would not have been able to go to the Agricultural Development Bank and get a loan. From the 1st of January of this year, once you are a registered farmer on our database, which is essentially a very simple process of going to one of our county offices and registering, you will now be in a position to access all of the revised incentives that the ministry has to offer, as well as be eligible for a loan from the Agricultural Development Bank. And in that way, what we've done is we've opened up now thousands of acres of lands that were lying barren previously, because these farmers were at a disadvantage because they couldn't access incentives through no fault of their own, but because of the bureaucracy of not having had their status being made legal.